What's up, everybody? It's the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast coming at you a day later. I've had a little personal chaotic schedule, but that's okay. Working through it, and thanks to the flexibility of the man next to me, I appreciate your flexibility, John. How you doing, buddy? How's your week going?
It's going pretty well, man. Training camp is like, I know we're talking about it and everything, but it's almost like caught up on me, like off guard, because this month has been kind of busy for both of us. And all of a sudden it's July 21st and camp starts in like, a couple days for rookies. They report, and then vets report the beginning of next week. And then the next 6 months, here we go.
That's right. It's like boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And so obviously we've been, we've been bringing you stuff on this show, and we've been, Matt Minnick has been doing his thing on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, bringing you some shows. And then of course we've added Bengal Jim and friends. They've been bringing all kinds of special guests, and they've got some more coming up this week. And we've got a special announcement towards the end of the show as well. So we'll unveil that one. So a lot of stuff happening on the podcast channel, a lot of stuff happening on our show, and of course with the Cincinnati Bengals. And we've got a lot to talk about this week because the Bengals have a new Ring of Honor inductees. They have new helmets. I guess we can talk a little bit about that. We talked about that last week, but they've got new helmets. They've got new Ring of Honor inductees. And then, of course, there's some talk about them renaming the stadium that currently is Paul Brown Stadium. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've got another portion of the schedule we're going to look at in the AFC East, and then we've got to remember when for you. So we've got a lot to get to this evening and this week on the show. And yes, I know that the past few weeks, for those who like the Happening Headline show, I've taken a couple weeks off of that will come back, especially during the season and during preseason training camp. All that stuff, we'll be bringing you all kinds of stuff on this show and the others on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. So you'll have a lot of stuff throughout the week to digest, and hopefully you enjoy all of it. And speaking of the podcast channel, you can get this show and the others I mentioned on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel through the Cincy Jungle channel on your favorite audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any of the major ones, we are there. And then, of course, if you like the video portions, you got to give a thumbs up on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page and like that if you're a Facebook fiend. Or if you like the YouTube stuff, you can go and click our show icon right beneath that SB Nation Cincy Jungle logo on John's side of the screen there. And click that, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available, all of that. And hopefully you enjoyed the interview with Cam Taylor-Britt last week. That was pretty fun, right, John?
That was a lot of fun. I'm glad it got a lot of traction. The word was spread around, so I'm glad it reached a lot of people. We'll definitely have to catch up with him later in the rookie season, or maybe after the rookie season when he's got some more time.
Yeah, thanks again to Sports Trust Advisors for hooking us up with that. That was a really cool opportunity, and he was a lot of fun to talk to. Great guy, and hoping and expecting great things on the field for him coming up soon here. Well, I guess let's just kind of start with a quick spot. And of course, I'm throwing a curveball at you just to start the show, John. We went through all the things we're going to be talking about, but the helmets, real quick. We talked about the helmets last week. We talked about all kinds of different things. Is it going to be the old school Bengal one? Is it going to be all of that? Well, it turns out it was kind of the one that was expected. It was the white tiger, the white helmet that they are choosing to unveil. Surprised, happy? What are your emotions on that one as we kind of start to turn the page on that topic from last week?
Not surprised at all, considering what the reaction was. Like, they knew that the majority of fans were wanting to go white and black with that. I think the biggest, not surprise, but the thing I learned about this is that we knew that there was going to be, or you can only wear these new helmets with an alternate jersey. We've seen this with several other teams that announced their alternates. I think the Panthers released an all black one. The Patriots recently had like their classic retro, or the Giants, what they went with the 1980s, 1990s, like blue look, and they're all wearing those with alternate jerseys. So when the Bengals announced white Bengal, they didn't reveal the helmet, and they easily could have. Like it's supposed to probably be ready by now. It's late July, and they didn't do that. So we haven't seen an actual official image of the helmet, and I guess it's because they're going to reveal it with a brand new alternate jersey, and this jersey will be presumably all white and black. So that's the thing I guess that I didn't necessarily think of when this was being brought up. I thought that they could do like their normal, regular white and black New jerseys that they unveiled last year with white socks and the white pants, and that would be it. But if the NFL rules state that you have to wear this with an alternate uniform, then I think we are going to get a white and black alternate. It has to be somewhat different or noticeably different compared to the jersey that they have now. So whatever changes they make to this alternate uniform remains to be seen. But I guess we're going to get both a new helmet and a completely new alternative look that completely embodies, I guess they're going with white Bengal. We've called this white tiger in the past, but they're Bengals. They're not called the Tigers, I guess. So white Bengal it is. And I guess we're waiting to see what the entire new alternate look looks like.
Good question here from Robert Obrecht. Do you know the rules for the playoffs and if the new helmet, if there are any? I think you can wear them twice in the year, right? In the regular season. So I haven't really. I mean, here we are already expecting the postseason. I love it. And wondering what they're going to wear. But I don't. We'll have to kind of research that unless you know that one off the top of your head, John.
I just know that they can't wear alternate uniforms in the playoffs because people were asking if they could wear orange during like their playoff game against the Raiders, and they couldn't. So I'm assuming the alternate helmet falls under the same bylaws because it is technically an alternate uniform.
That's what I would assume as well, but we'll double check on that one there. So yeah, I mean, expected, and the Bengals have their new helmets. I think, I'm excited to see what it looked like. Again, kind of the traditionalist in me would have liked to have seen the callback to the old school uniforms, especially with this Ring of Honor initiative and everything that they've been doing over the past couple of years to honor past greats. And so I kind of wanted to see that one, or maybe the alternative, pre-2004 Bengals with the tiger leaping tiger on the shoulder, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, we'll see. But I am.
But how cool would that be though if they did the alternate, like the '90s, the late '90s, but an all white and black version of that with a leaping tiger? I feel like that would be like the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yeah,
that'd be pretty sweet. And I think it seems like they are going to. We lost John there for a second, but we'll get him back. But it seems like that they're going to also do the white tiger aesthetic, I would think, on the field as they wear that, whether it's the leaping tiger in the middle and or end zones, all that kind of stuff. I think we got you back now, John. So I think, I think the field will probably be painted in a similar aesthetic on game day when they wear that uniform.
You have to at that point. Like if you're going to go all white and black, presumably a whiteout in the crowd in the stadium, might as well just do the field too while you're at it. The return of the leaping tiger, I think, would just it would be like the bow on top of this 2-year renaissance of re-engaging the fans, because I feel like that's the one final thing that like fans are really looking for in terms of recognizing that the organization is starting to like listen to all of their feedback. Like they're still so caught up on this B and the logo and the lack of representation for the tiger head. I think the return of the leaping tiger for maybe once or twice a year, I think that would do wonders for them.
Yeah. So anyway, the Bengals have a new alternate helmet and a new uniform combination. It's also going to be interesting to see when they actually, against which teams they unveil those with. So we'll see what happens there. But I wanted to kind of close the book on that because we talked about it. And then, of course, as it always seems to happen with our shows and everything, we talk about a particular topic, and then it gets announced a day after, or a couple of days after the topic we talk about. That's just how it always goes on this show, of course. And we're going to get John back here in just a second. But there are a number of different topics we're going to cover tonight, and that was just one we wanted to touch on before we keep rolling on here. But I think we have John back, and I think maybe we've got his mic back here.
This is going to be a fun show. I can already tell. Oh, God.
Don't move a
I'm
muscle.
Trying not to.
Right? Well, it's good to have you back. We got your mic back. We got your beautiful mug back, so that's good. Let's talk some Ring of Honor. I was not surprised at one selection. I was surprised a little bit at another, not because I think that person was unworthy. I just felt that maybe a little bit of a popularity contest, recency bias, all of that. So let's talk about the first inductee that I feel, I would assume you and I both, if we go back and run the tape from a few episodes ago, I think we both had this guy making it in this time, and that is Willie Anderson. So Willie Anderson is in the Ring of Honor. They only let in 2. So let's talk Willie Anderson credentials, all of that. We've talked a lot about him, but this is kind of the low-hanging fruit a little bit here. Willie Anderson now part of the Ring of Honor.
And I think he's in here because he's clearly one of the 5 or 6 greatest players to ever wear a Bengals jersey. And that's why people are pushing for him to be in the Hall of Fame. It's why he was a semi-finalist for the Hall of Fame for the first time this past season. I think fans just recognize how dominant he was. And part of like the Ring of Honor, I think from a fan perspective, is to get these guys more notoriety on the national stage, and having a Ring of Honor and inducting these guys early helps boost their resumes and kind of remind people of how great that they were. Not a lot of Bengals have made both 4 Pro Bowls and 3 first-team All-Pros, especially during a time when the team was absolute trash. So Willie Anderson having that recognition while the Bengals were still trying to catch their feet. And then, of course, I think he made the All-Pros when Marvin Lewis took over, and then they were still a little bit more relevant. So that definitely helped his case. And that was also towards the end of his career. Like, Willie Anderson never really had a bad season, even though he played into his 30s. So he was still playing really high-level football late into his career. He did it for 95% of his career in Cincinnati. He had the 1 year in Baltimore, but I don't think fans really hold that against him. He is arguably, and I think the argument's pretty strong, the greatest right tackle in the modern era of the NFL. And that stigma of right versus left tackle kind of still lingers even today, when the value of both positions is still tremendous. Like, Bengals fans obviously know the value of a right tackle now because they've had not so very good play from that position for the last decade or so. So I think this is just a recognition that Willie Anderson is clearly one of the 5 or 6 best Bengals to ever play, and this is an easy nomination.
It is an easy nomination, and one that I feel that is very well deserved. And we had Willie on years ago on the program. We hopefully will get him on again sometime soon. But this is the kind of stuff that it's not to the, and I don't want to speak for him, but it's not to the effect of I want all this personal notoriety, but it does validate a lot of things. And I do feel that he feels that he has been slighted in a number of different ways because of who he played for, the teams he was on, all of that. You look back, John, there's in his tenure, look at the success of Corey Dillon with him on that offensive line. Look at the success of Rudy Johnson on that offensive line. There's all kinds of different, running backs had a lot of success. You look at in 2003, the year that John Kitna had. You look at the years that Carson Palmer had with Willie Anderson back there. Yes, there were a lot of other talented linemen on that group: Eric Steinbach, Levi Jones, Rich Bram, Bobby Williams. I mean, they had a good offensive line across the board, really. But he was definitely the star. He was definitely the rock. And when you look at so many of the other individual successes at the skill positions, namely quarterback, running back, and then, of course, wide receivers, because the pass protection was there, you got to point to this guy, and you got to say that this is a guy that just continues to deserve the recognition. And hopefully this step is another stepping stone into him potentially getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Robert Obrick bringing up, he gave up less than 10 sacks total for his career. I was trying to look up how many sacks he allowed when I was writing the announcement on CincyJungle.com, which you can read right now. But I did know off the top of my head that he only gave up 1 sack to like the top 11 or 15 sack artists of all time. And the 1 sack was against the all-time leading sack artist in Bruce Smith. And that happened, I think, at the end of a game. And it was like a play that didn't even matter at all. So it was interesting about with Willie, and that he'll say, and I think he did say this on Bengals.com, that he got tremendously better and more improved in pass protection as his career unfolded. Obviously, when you're in the 90s, you're still running the ball very often. So that was his main asset in his game. But the fact that he was so dominant as a pass protector all throughout his career, but he will tell you that he didn't really start that way. He just got better and better. It just speaks to the sheer talent that he had, being 6'4", 6'5", 330 pounds, and to be able to move like that in pass protection. Like, it's awesome when he posts clips of his tape in Pass Pro, and the technique is so perfectly sound, but you can tell that he's moving tremendous amounts of force in a very quick fashion. It's technique and it's natural gift, and that's why he's one of the greatest overall offensive linemen of all time.
Outstanding player, and a guy that he's great guy, continues to do a lot of different things in the game of football, and just a really, really nice guy. And I think that he's very excited about this. And hopefully, like I said, this is a stepping stone to proper recognition in Canton. Guy deserves a very, very good player, and a guy that was one of the best draft picks ever made by the Cincinnati Bengals. So congratulations to Willie Anderson. And again, kind of predictable. I think we both felt that he was going to be one of the choices here because of the credentials, because of the talent, and all of that. Now, here's where there was a little bit of surprise, and that is with the original 85, Mr. Isaac Curtis. And so I had felt, because of recency bias, popularity, personality, and all of that, and recent success, all of that kind of stuff, I had felt that Chad Johnson was going to be the pick, potentially maybe even Boomer Esiason because of the NFL MVP, all that kind of stuff. But Isaac Curtis won his way in, and an incredible player as well, a guy that doesn't get talked about enough because of all kinds of different things. But, this is a guy, John, I'll try and pull up an old tweet of mine because I looked at some things. But if you look at the stats between and accolades between Isaac Curtis and a guy like Drew Pearson, who made the Hall of Fame recently with the Dallas Cowboys, it's pretty much mirror image type of stuff, man. And Isaac Curtis was a deep threat. Isaac Curtis had immense speed. He had great moves. I think, did I hear he was a college running back? Or something like that? Did I hear?
He's like a track star, I think, in college.
Yeah.
And he converted.
Yes. So, I mean, San Diego State boy, gotta love that. But a guy that just was, just electric on the field. Really, he and Ken Anderson kind of changed a bit of the way the game of football is played in the modern era. It was a lot of ground and pound type of stuff, and seeing this type of football between he and Ken Anderson really changed a lot of things. So another guy that I don't know that he'll ever get the Canton type of chatter, but when you stack up the numbers with some of the other players in Canton, he's right there.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned Drew Pearson, who just got into the Hall of Fame, even though he was a 1970s all-decade player, and he won multiple Super Bowls with the Cowboys, and that's usually something that guarantees you a ticket to Canton. So if Drew Pearson had to wait like 50 years or 40 years, then it doesn't appear too good for Isaac Curtis, even though I think when you talk about the Hall of Fame, you should include the guys that really changed the game, where you can't tell the story of football or the NFL without mentioning these guys. And Isaac Curtis kind of gets lost in that discussion, even though he belongs there, because he entered the league in 1973 and completely changed how defensive backs were able to play the game, because they couldn't keep up with the speed. He was running past these guys, and they were holding him and grabbing him and tackling him in the secondary. And the NFL's like, well, this can't really be allowed. So they changed it, and they made it the Isaac Curtis rule. And I think it was like multiple rules that impacted that. So his impact on the game is outstanding. And he averaged, I think, 17.1 yards per catch, which is still a Bengals record in terms of guys who played a significant amount of time in Cincinnati. But 17 yards per catch in the 70s or even the pre-90s is an insane stat. He was a phenomenal player. I think a lot of fans will say that he's probably the most talented receiver to ever play with the Bengals. That's saying something, even wearing the number 85 and how legendary that legacy has. But he started it. And I think that's the reason ultimately why he's in here, because the majority of season ticket holders, they're, on the older side. These guys have gone to games for a long time, and they might have even seen Isaac Curtis play. And I don't think that they want to see another Ken Riley situation where a guy unfortunately passes away before he gets his day in the sun. And Ken Riley's still fighting for a Hall of Fame induction, and Isaac Curtis may never have that strong of a case compared to Ken Riley. But I think because Curtis is kind of up there compared to other nominees on this list, I think this was a recognition of a guy who came in the early years of the franchise, make sure that he's in the Ring of Honor, that he can see his name in the Ring of Honor and he can have this moment, but just also recognizing one of the first to really do it. And really the guy who kickstarted a legendary legacy at the wide receiver position for Cincinnati.
We had the pleasure of having Ken Anderson on a few times on this show. He's been very kind to us. And I wish I had the clip pulled up, John, but I vividly remember a quote from him because Ken's always the guy that talks about his teammates and how great his team around him was and all that kind of stuff. He called him. Do you? You'll probably remember this. He said Isaac Curtis was Jerry Rice before Jerry Rice was in the league. Do you remember that? Do you remember him saying that about? Yeah, and that's really kind of an accurate depiction of who Isaac Curtis was. He's just not talked about in the same vein. I'm going to show you what I was talking about earlier. That just a statistical comparison on these two. These are Drew Pearson's numbers here. And you look, 73 through 83, you look at 7,822 yards, 489 catches, 48 touchdowns, 50.1 yards per game. Where's the yards per reception? 16. So, I mean, it's, especially playing 14 games for a while and all of that. I mean, you look at it and you go, okay, seasons with 2 touchdowns and then 8. And then a couple with 2 and 3, another one with 8 and 6. So you look at that, you go, okay. And then here, I believe the next one is Isaac Curtis here. So you look at that, 71.01, pretty comparable. Look at the 17.1 yards per receptions. He beats Pearson there. 53 touchdowns, less yards per game on that. But just a guy that 416, he's right there with Drew Pearson and a lot of stuff. And then you also look at the Pro Bowl berths right there with him as well. So a guy, and this isn't a knock on Drew Pearson, but I think it goes to show you a bit as to team success and obviously market and all of that playing into someone getting more individual notoriety than a player who also deserves it, like an Isaac Curtis, who helped shape the era of football in which he played.
And the time that they played means so much in terms of who gets in the Hall of Fame, because I think it was Mike Tanier who writes for Football Outsiders, and I think he is involved in some way of like the Hall of Fame voting as well. And he says that like back in the 70s and 80s, the writers, the guys who voted who are voting these guys in, like they mainly watched the Raiders, Cowboys, and Steelers because those were the teams that ended up playing on the games that were televised the most, and they played it in the Super Bowls. And there's just a bias towards teams of that caliber that played in those markets, that played in the biggest games. The Bengals, they were good in the 70s, but they didn't make a Super Bowl until 81 in the later years of Curtis's career. And he just falls flat, or not flat. He just falls into that category of teams that the voters didn't really pay attention to, because that was just what it was. Like there wasn't NFL Red Zone back in the 70s. There wasn't media that covered all 32 teams back then. So Curtis will never get that recognition from the current crop of voters who are, older than dirt, but at least he gets into the Bengals Ring of Honor because he absolutely deserves it. And again, he, like his yards, his receptions, his touchdowns, his yards per reception, it's all top 5 in Bengals history in terms of receivers. And it's a fantastic history of receivers. And he did this back in the 70s. Now, granted, he had one of the greatest quarterbacks of that era throwing him the football, but the fact that his statistics still stand the test of time after or before all these other guys like Chad and AJ came through, it's remarkable. And it's a true testament to how good he was.
Yeah. And again, it's calling him a surprise it's by no means a knock. I just, I kind of felt like, it would seem that the favorites would have been Chad or Boomer for that other spot alongside Willie, just because of popularity, notoriety, team success around those two as well. But, Curtis is a guy that is incredibly deserving and is, for every good receiver that has worn number 85, he was the first guy to do it. And he was the guy that kind of paved the way for all of these and really, again, kind of changed the game and how that position is played, how, in that generation, changed a lot. And, you talk about certain things of what existed and how the game was played and all this kind of stuff, who was on TV, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, if you look at the Raiders of that generation, the Steelers, the Cowboys, look how many Hall of Famers they have just from those 3 teams alone.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the other thing, I know everybody now is really locked in, and for good reason, to PFF. If a site like that existed at the time for either one of these players, I think it came into existence maybe towards the end of Willie Anderson's career, if I'm not mistaken. But if you had that during that, that's another metric where you go, wow, this person deserves more notoriety, more accolades, because there is a set of metrics to gauge how good they are at their respective position. There wasn't. And so there, that other outlet for less popular teams, less televised teams, all that kind of stuff just was not there. And unfortunately, some of these great players on these Bengals teams fall through the cracks.
Yeah. And I think this might be a trend that we see for the next couple of years because there is a backlog of a lot of older Bengals veterans and legends who deserve recognition in the Ring of Honor. So I think Chad will eventually get in the next 2 to 3 years because they're going to do at least 2 per year, I would assume. Mm-hmm. It might increase to 3 or 4, but I think 2 is probably a safe bet for now. So I think it's a safe bet that we'll see at least one pre-1990s Bengal get inducted every single year for the foreseeable future. But the other spot could be filled by a Chad Johnson or by a Boomer Esiason or someone like that. So I think that's a nice formula going forward, just to recognize the guys who have waited so long for this to be a thing. Be a thing in existence, but also like Chad Johnson deserves to be in the first handful of classes, no doubt.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. But congratulations both to Willie Anderson and Isaac Curtis for being the next 2 inductees in the Bengals Ring of Honor, joining Paul Brown, Anthony Munoz, Ken Anderson, and the great Ken Riley, all joining in there. And they will probably be doing. Are they doing the same thing, John? Was it on the Monday Night Football game at the end?
It is the exact same
Thursday night game against the Dolphins. Rather,
it's another Week 4 Thursday night game. Hopefully, they're not down 14-0 at halftime.
Oh God, yeah! Please no, please no. And we're actually, good segue for later, we're actually going to talk some Miami Dolphins, believe it or not, on this show a little bit as we continue to cruise through the Bengals schedule and all kinds of different things. But we haven't done one of these in a little while. We've got 2 topics to talk about in a State Your Case. So that's where we're going next. All right, John, I have come, and unfortunately, as I get older and have kids and all this kind of stuff, I have not been able to be a video game guy as much as I used to. I grew up, I think the last system I bought was maybe a PS4, so I don't have the newest Xbox or newest, or PS5 or anything. But I was playing video games up to until my first son was born a handful of years ago, and that has really fallen by the wayside because time is at a premium. But I got to tell you, my friend, a video game franchise that I bought a lot and enjoyed for whether it was when I was a little kid or later on in life is Madden Football. And I have become very disenchanted with that football franchise. No offense to the late, great John Madden himself. Visually, good game. I know a lot of people like it, but there exists this little ivory tower of developers or what have you in that game that come up with these ratings. And now I'm not the guy that get all up in arms on what guys are rated on video games, but there seems to be an inherent, I don't know, again, an anti-Bengal bias, or just are you even paying attention to this team? Are you paying attention to what they did last year? The rankings of players like DJ Reader, Jamar Chase, and others. I think Joe Burrow, what is he, a 91 in that game? I don't know. But it's just kind of flawed. And I know it's kind of a petty thing to get up in arms about, but it has just kind of turned into this thing where this group of people has kind of turned into this.
There's a conspiracy.
We know more than you do about this. This is what we're doing. And it's not a big deal. I mean, obviously you can tweak the game to make it where you can beat anybody you want, or whatever you want to do with difficulties and stuff. And again, I shouldn't, with all the things that go on in life, I should not get up in arms about Madden freaking ratings. But every year it just seems like you go, where's the respect?
I think because it was coming off of this year, that's why the outrage is more amplified. It is always hilarious, though, when people get mad about Madden ratings because they're released in July before training camp even begins, and they look nothing like how they finish in like February in the Super Bowl. I guess I am curious what the ratings look like compared to when they played the Rams versus right now. I would assume that Jamar Chase would have been higher than an 87 towards the end of that season, but I think there is I think someone said that they do account for like, hey, you're a rookie, you did great, let's see if you do it again. And maybe that's just what it is for the entire team. Like this, they came out of nowhere. Let's see if you can kind of do that again. Let's see if you can be as good as you are. For me, like I don't really care at all. Like again, you can change them. That's always been the funniest thing for me. Like I change Madden player ratings all the time whenever I had the game. I played the game the last 2 years just because it was on sale. But I used to be like a day one Madden player, and I stopped playing like I don't know 2015 because the game it never changed. Like it's Electronic Arts, and they're notorious for not really updating their products and
copy and paste.
No, it really is. Like the engine has remained the same for I think about a decade. They made changes in the early 2010s, and it was fun. That was when NCAA was still a thing, and the NCAA engine somehow was so far superior to Madden. It was crazy because Madden should have been a bigger product because it represented a bigger league and everything, and actually had the rights to the players. So Madden has always been kind of stale to me, at least in the last decade. And I guess like the process of what the ratings are and how they weight the ratings, that hasn't really changed. But whatever gets you motivated, I guess, if you're Jamar Chase or DJ Reader saying F you to, I think he added like the wrong account too. He added some random person named Madden.
They're probably
like
like, what do I do? Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever gets you motivated, I guess. I would imagine if they're good again, the ratings are going to rise though. So this will all be forgotten.
Yeah, it will. And they do roster updates and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's not in the grand scheme of things. It's just a small, minute thing, but it's just like, it just elicits eye rolls. And yes, I was the guy a long time ago. I'm going back to Sega Dreamcast days, John. If you remember Sega Dreamcast, I was a 2K guy. I really liked 2K when 2K football was out there. I still have the one where T.O. on the Eagles is out. I think that was one of the last ones they made, 2K5 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That the gameplay there and everything, I just really enjoyed 2K5 over Madden. And then obviously Madden got the monopoly there. And if you wanted a football game to play that was realistic and still fun, you had to go with Madden. But man, those ratings sometimes you just elicits eye rolls, like I said.
It really is just I think that is the mindset here. Like you guys were so good last year. There's no way you're going to be that good again. And this is now towards individual players. And I know people are going to bring up like Trey Hendrickson has a ton of sacks in the last 2 years, but you know, I kind of get because the ratings take into account of like athleticism traits, like Myles Garrett's probably like a 95 speed or whatever. He's 270 pounds. Like that gets you rated higher in that category. And some of those categories, I think, weight the overall rating more. Whereas with Hendrickson, he's more of like a technique guy. He's not the greatest athlete in the world compared to other edge rushers. Maybe that's why his overall is a little bit lower. With Chase, I don't really understand because we know he's ridiculously fast and strong, and those ratings like matter. So maybe like his catching is still kind of I don't know. I don't know the intricacy of it. All I know is like Joe Burrow's a top 4 quarterback, and no one's complaining about that. So I don't know.
Well, someone get EA Sports on the horn. We're gonna have a word with them. Continuing a state your case, John. There is a bit of news that has surfaced over the past couple of days about the Bengals either adding to or moving away from the Paul Brown Stadium moniker. It could be something field at Paul Brown Stadium, or again, I'm that traditionalist guy. I like traditions. I like history. I was a history major, for God's sake. So
really, I never did this.
Yeah, history, poli-sci. So that's kind of a thing for me where I'm like, hey, I like traditions and history for the most part. I mean, obviously there's history and traditions that are not good and you don't want to hang on to some of that stuff. So, but something like that and hanging on to Paul Brown Stadium, I like that. And I like that there's not this commercial aspect to the Bengals stadium. However, I understand that they might need a little extra money coming in because of some contracts coming up. What's your take on this topic of the Bengals potentially adding to or moving away from the Paul Brown Stadium name for their home field?
So there are multiple aspects with this, and the consensus seems to be that they're doing this because they need north of $200 million in guaranteed money to pay both Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. That guaranteed money is put into escrow. You need it on hand. You can't touch it. Yada, yada, yada. Bengals are cash poor, whatever. Here's the thing. I think the Dallas Cowboys got about $17 million per year at most from AT&T when AT&T took over Jerry World, Cowboy Stadium. Mm-hmm. That's Dallas. That's one of the biggest markets in football in the country. It's the most brandable football organization in the NFL. AT&T is $1 billion or whatever company. They got 17 million. Whatever the Bengals get from P&G or whatever company, and presumably based in Cincinnati, is going to sponsor the stadium if that deal comes through, it's not going to be what the Cowboys got from AT&T. It's going to be in the range of maybe 10 million per year. And mind you, the county, Hamilton County, owns the stadium. They're going to get a cut of that. They're going to get a sizable cut of that in the beginning. And as time goes on, the Bengals get a bigger and bigger cut. This is not going to make that big of a dent in terms of how much cash the Bengals have on hand or their overall liquidity. And this is, again, 1 or 2 years away from them paying both Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I don't think this is about we need to as much cash as possible to pay these contracts. Troy Blackburn in 2017 was asked about potentially selling the naming rights to the stadium, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he basically said that for a small market team, a company taking over the stadium name would net them a handful of million per year. And they, like yourself, they probably value Paul Brown Stadium at whatever monetary value, and the value of them selling that name doesn't eclipse the value of the name remaining the same. Enter Joe Burrow, playoff win, Super Bowl run. The Bengals are marketable, they're brandable, they've got primetime games coming to Cincinnati. Now the value of the name of the stadium has increased. And I think this is the Bengals as an organization saying, hey, now the price of the name on the stadium has eclipsed the value that we have of keeping the stadium name the same. And this is them kind of selling while the price is at the highest it's ever been. I think that's more what it is. But to your point, naturally, more cash on hand means it will be easier to pay those contracts. But in terms of actually paying those contracts with a stadium deal, it's not going to make that much of a difference, I don't think.
Do you see a situation, this may be just a total reach here, but where now they've got this indoor practice facility and that is named something, either Paul Brown or I don't know, whatever, if they move off of that for the state? Like, do you see separate corporate sponsorships for the separate facilities, if that makes sense to them? Do you see them blah 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 field at Paul Brown Stadium? Or I mean, I guess I would find it personally, I would find it very hard to believe that they move off of that Paul Brown Stadium name somehow. I think that's still included in the title. Personally.
Me too. And I think the Broncos and the Chiefs, at least, there's probably more teams that have done this. They've also kept Mile High Stadium for Denver. It's like Sports Authority Field at Mile High Stadium. Maybe it's something else now. I forget what it is for the Chiefs. It's like a bank, but it's like something field at Arrowhead Stadium. So fans and media still call it Mile High and Arrowhead, and I'm sure most will call it Paul Brown Stadium if that is the case. It's just a matter of what sponsor wants to take that deal, what sponsor has enough money to, intrigue the Bengals with that. I don't know if the deal would be bigger if they took off Paul Brown Stadium entirely, but I do agree that because of Mike Brown, as much of a business man type of stigma that he gets, like, he's a man of tradition. That's why he wanted to keep the name of his dad on the stadium. So I think you're right. I think he would be hard pressed to take Paul Brown completely off of the title, but it's just about a matter of finding that right partner.
I would agree with you. Well, that's a little bit of topics and or state your case there, topics within state your case, Madden football and the naming rights of the stadium. And as we know, John, I was saying a little bit earlier this on the show here, we know that we'll talk about it. And guess what's going to happen? It's going to be announced like tomorrow after we go live. That's how it always goes when we try and do some of that stuff. Well, we're going to quickly go through the AFC East here. We're going to try and get this done in about 12 to 15 minutes, maybe, if we're able to do that, to keep it within manageable amount of time. Where do we want to start? Which team do you want to start with, John?
Let's kind of start at the bottom here. Let's work our way up. So let's start with the Jets.
All right, let's go with the Jets. We're going to pull up on nyjets.com, their roster. We will pull this up. It is grouped by position here. So here we are. I mean, you got the center McGovern, and then here are your corners here. You got Sauce, your boy Sauce there that they've brought in. You got Michael Carter, who we became familiar with last year when the Bengals played the Jets. You got Sauce there, Brandon Eccles, Isaiah Dunn, Guidry, Bryce Hall, Hardy, DJ Reed. I mean, So there's other, when you look at the other defensive backs, Craig James, Justin Pinnock, and then we can go to the other members of the secondary. But as the Bengals get set to take on the Jets here, is this a secondary group? You look here, Tony Adams, Ashton Davis, LaMarcus Joyner, who came over from the Rams a couple years ago, Moffitt, Parks, Riley. Is this a scary secondary for you as it matches up with the Bengals wide receiver core, quarterback, etc.?
So the Bengals didn't have that much issue passing on the Jets last year in that game that people like to forget, but they did need that true number one corner, and that's what Sauce gives them. Mm-hmm. Now I think they do run some form of like a cover one or a cover three. So Sauce is going to be on an island. He's going to be pressing. That's what he did at UC, and he did it so well that quarterbacks barely threw him the ball. Whenever they did throw him the ball, he usually got a hand on the ball. So to see Sauce go up against like T. Higgins, like a lanky corner versus a lanky receiver, that should be really fun. Reed was actually very good last year. I think he was PFF's 8th ranked cornerback in their system, but not a lot of people talk about him because he plays for the Jets. And then they have Carter the second, who was the other Michael Carter, the guy who plays on defense. So he's a second-year player kind of playing in the slot. It's crazy how much their safeties have changed, though, because they used to have Jamal Adams and Marcus May back there, and then they traded one, and then they let the other one go to the Saints. So they got completely new safeties back there. It's got promise, but I think it still needs to definitely prove itself.
So interesting on the defensive line, they got a good value pick in Jermaine Johnson in the draft here, rookie out of Florida State. You look along the defensive line, you got Vinny Curry, who is a former high pick as well, who's up there in age. Rankins is a good player. They stole him from the Bengals. The Bengals were interested in him, I believe, last year before they pivoted to Larry Ogunjobi, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've got Rashid, Shepard, Smart. They did bring in Solomon Thomas, who had a lot of promise, and all kinds of different things have caused him to be a little bit of a disappointment in the NFL. Tim Ward, and then of course Quinnen Williams there. So, some pretty good names on this line, but some question marks as well for me.
Did you say the former Bengal? Did he come up?
The former Bengal,
Carl Lawson.
Carl Lawson. Yes. How could I forget?
I was waiting for that.
I think you know what? I think they've got him on the injury part of the roster here. Yeah. So yes, Carl Lawson. Hello. By the way, this is the division where you're going to be like, oh yeah, he used to play for the Bengals. He used to play for the. I mean, it's like Buffalo and the Jets, and I mean all these teams. You're like, oh god. So yes, Carl Lawson adding to that. So yeah, I mean they've got some edge talent between Johnson, obviously Lawson and others, and then you've got Quinnen Williams there in the middle, Sheldon Rankins. I mean, they've got some players there.
Yeah, I think going back to last year, like they were really desperate to add to that group, which is why they gave Carl Lawson a bag that the Bengals weren't comfortable giving. And then with one of their 3 first-round picks, they drafted Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State, who almost made it to the Bengals, I think, at the end of the first round. But he was a little bit of an older prospect, kind of like a late bloomer in Florida State because he transferred, I think, from like Georgia Tech or something like that. So they've really kind of revamped that whole group. If Vinny Curry is like your third edge, though, like it's still definitely a work in progress. And I think it was almost exactly a year ago when Carl Lawson got injured during training camp for the Jets. So we haven't seen him play since he was a Bengal. And
that's right.
If he hasn't, I guess they're probably going to activate him right before training camp if he's healthy. But some of those guys, they take a little bit longer than others. It's not always going to be a Joe Burrow situation where you're ready to participate 8 or 9 months after the surgery. So maybe his was pretty severe, and maybe he's still going to be recovering towards August and whatnot. But it should be noted that this is like a week 3 game. So maybe Lawson won't be 100% of himself when he faces his former team. But he's definitely, when healthy, the best pass rusher on this defensive line.
Yeah, and then linebacker Mosley's kind of the big name there. They've got others: DQ Thomas, Jamie and Sherwood, Delshon Phillips, a bunch of others, Javin White, Quincy Williams. I mean, for me, if I'm looking at this, it's really a couple players in the secondary that give you some fits, and then the defensive line, not so much the middle of the defense.
Yeah, and Quinnen Williams, I think, is still talented. Sheldon Rankins probably still has some left in the tank. I'm curious what deal the Bengals were offering him. Maybe it was like a modest 3-year deal. I think it happened after they signed Ogunjobi. It was pretty late in free agency, and then rankings, I guess, kind of chose the Jets over them. So, he's going to be one of their pass rushing defensive tackles. But yeah, Quentin Williams is still a beast, even though I think the Jets were like entertaining offers to trade him because he was a 3rd overall pick at defensive tackle, and he's not necessarily Aaron Donald there. So maybe the value wasn't exactly great.
Is there a more interesting collection of quarterbacks than there are for the Jets based on national headlines, based on connections to the Bengals and all of that? You got Mike White, who was absolutely heroic against the Bengals last year. You've got Joe, Mr. Elite Flacco, backing up Zach Wilson, who was in the headlines for a lot of weird reasons recently. Zach Wilson, obviously the guy, being a top pick by them last year, flashed a little bit, but had some struggles. Obviously this team's going to go as he goes. Are you a Zach Wilson guy? I mean, do you think he's got the talent, or is he going to be, yet another high pick disappointment a little bit for the Jets?
Look, man, I saw a baby-faced quarterback out of BYU be a 2nd overall pick to a renowned terrible franchise, and I'm like, this guy's not going to be anything. And then he was terrible as a rookie, and it's really hard, unfortunately, for some of these rookie quarterbacks to come back from such a terrible first year. But based on these recent headlines, man, I think they do have their next Joe Namath in a lot more ways than one.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Going into the running backs, Coleman can do a lot of different things for you. You talked about Michael Carter earlier, Ty Johnson. They've got the other P. Ryan, LaMichael P. Ryan, in the group there. Again, just kind of by committee, it would seem there.
Yeah, and they drafted Breece Hall, I think, in the 2nd round. He was the first running back taken. So I think he's looked very highly in terms of like fantasy projections, just because like Coleman and P. Ryan, like they exist. And I think Coleman is one of the many former 49ers on this team because of who's the coach's name? Who's the coach's name?
Man, yeah, we're gonna have to edit this one. Good
Lord.
Yeah.
But they have 49ers guys on the staff. Like the staff is mainly comprised of former 49ers assistants. Robert Saleh. Yeah, of course. So Coleman is in there, and I think he's like 8 years into the league. So Breece Hall, a rookie, fresh legs, first running back drafted. I would assume that he's going to take the lion's share of these carries, and against the Bengals, probably like going to be out there more times than not.
Yeah, give us a break. We're going through all kinds of players and names and stuff. Give us a little bit of a break. Oh boy, the tight end collectors, just like the Baltimore Ravens here. You've got Cager, Conklin, Ruckert, the rookie, who a lot of Bengals fans wanted. You got Yeboah, Wesco, not listed here, is CJ Uzama as well, who bolted here for a big, a big payday here. They've got some talent in that group. I think they can. That's something for a young quarterback that he can lean on a little bit based on this group, and they may go kind of heavy tight end packages on offense.
And that must have been their logic too, because they committed like $40 million total to CJ Uzama and Tyler Conklin. And I think Conklin was a guy that was rumored to be interested from the Bengals side of things when Uzama left for the Jets. And so, like if Zach Wilson didn't have necessarily that guy at tight end last year that he could rely on as a safety blanket, might as well get 2 veterans there to kind of produce as one, I guess, really good tight end, because Conklin and Uzama as individuals aren't necessarily scaring defenses, if we're being honest, but as a tandem, if you utilize their strengths individually, I think you can net out a solid product there.
A lot of question marks, but a lot of potential big hits in the wide receiver group. You look at Corey Davis, who came over from the Titans. You look at Mims, who still has yet to prove himself at the pro level. You've got Elijah Moore, their pick from last year, and then the pick this year, Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. So a lot of like guys that could be mega hits, but a lot of injuries, a lot of questions, a lot of disappointments in there as well.
Yeah, you got to remember they were the other team that was trying to trade for Tyreek Hill, but apparently Hill had no interest in playing for the Jets. But this is what the Jets do, man. Like I was so confident that Denzel Mims was going to be really good, and now he's like almost out of the league. He's like wide receiver 4 for a team that was so desperate to add a wide receiver this offseason. So they signed Corey Davis. I think that was this year, right? It was, or maybe it was last
year. It was last
Okay,
year.
they signed Corey Davis last year. They drafted Elijah Moore last year, who was really good in that class. And then they drafted Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State this year. I don't know if you saw this, Anthony, but it was the funniest thing. Wilson was on a podcast with I think it was on the Adam Jones. He was with Adam Jones or like Ryan Clark or whatever. I think it was the Pivot podcast. And they were talking about like how rookies are treated in the NFL. And someone asked him if he's excited for like the rookie dinner. And he said, "Yeah, man, I'm really excited or whatnot." And they're like, "Why are you excited? You're about to drop a ton of money on the dinner." Like, "No, they're not going to make me pay." And like, "Yeah, dude, they're going to make you pay $75,000." Like, "Wait, what? 75? They're not making me pay 75." So he might be dropping like $1 million on this rookie vet dinner.
Oh boy,
they're probably going to see that. So I guess he had no idea that's how it goes if you're a rookie.
Oh man,
he was one of the first receivers drafted, really talented out of Ohio State, can stretch the field, do a lot of things that they wanted Tyreek to do. But yeah, it's just a lot of individual components trying to form a competent receiving group, and ultimately it's going to go as far as Zach Wilson kind of takes them.
That's exactly right, and that is the story of the Jets. Let's go with the Dolphins. This is one of the most difficult teams for me to figure out. Kind of like when we talked, I said the same thing about the Saints when we went over the NFC South a couple of weeks ago. And here is the Miami Dolphins roster. We'll go through some of these a little bit more quickly here. Really, I mean, you look at their cornerback group between Howard, Jones, and Benogany. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I mean they've got some corners that can play, right? And so that in itself, Quincy Wilson, D'Angelo Ross. I mean these are some guys that can do some things on defense there. There's no doubt about it. Howard's just a beast. So that's going to provide a little bit of a challenge for the Bengals offense in that defensive backfield.
Yeah, and hopefully Byron and Xavier are good. They spent like collectively $200 million on both of them in recent years. But yeah, those guys are on the boundary. I think Nick Needham is their slot. And like you said, the cornerback from Auburn, who was drafted last year, he's kind of filling in to that depth. And then you got, I think in the backfield there, Javon Holland, who was a 2021 second round pick. He was really good as a rookie last year, and he's playing next to Brandon Jones, who came from Texas. They don't have Rashard Jones anymore. He's kind of in the past now, but yeah, their secondary is solid. Like I think the defense overall is solid. They just needed a couple more pieces at defensive line, and they added at least one this offseason.
And they've got our boy Clayton Fedulum in the backfield as well. Special teams ace Clayton Fedulum. All right, defensive line. Really, it's Ogba. I mean, they when the Bengals last played them in Miami, that was the Burrow Bowl. They absolutely got after the Bengals quarterbacks. And now the Bengals took their defensive line, Coach Marion Hobby, and he now coaches for the Bengals. And oh, by the way, the Bengals defensive line did pretty well last year. They've got some players here. You look at Raekwon Davis. And then, of course, there is Christian Wilkins, their top pick from a couple of years ago from the University of Clemson. So, I mean, there's some names in here that are pretty good, but overall, again, kind of, especially in the interior, they're a little bit by committee.
Yeah, Wilkins is a beast. It's developed very nicely since he was a rookie in 2019. I think Melvin Ingram now is there. I mean, he's still kicking it at like 33, 34 years old. And then Ogba, I think is like a staple for just like a good, not great edge. Like he will definitely have some games when he pops off against subpar opposing tackles, but he's not like exactly the game-breaking edge that you want to like build around. So I think they're just short of a younger version of Melvin Ingram, like they've got him game breaker in his prime, I guess. But they have like good complementary pieces around Wilkins, who again to his own right is just a beast in run defense, and he can definitely push the pocket as well.
Yeah, Gustin, former SC boy, part of the linebacker group. And then you've got Jalen Phillips, a guy that can do a few things. They've kind of collected a lot of linebackers here, and really, they note Ingram as that. So really, the names that kind of pop out: Jerome Baker. You got former Bengal, right? Darius Hodge, right there. Yeah. Former Bengal, Porter Gustin. You've got him, Ingram, and a few other, Jalen Phillips, and a few others there in the linebacker group.
Yeah, it's really Jerome Baker's really the leader there from Ohio State, and he's always been, I guess, a decent player. But again, like solid, not great, not terrible players filling out the defense, I would say.
So going to the offensive line here, Terran Armstead, obviously the big get. A lot of Bengals fans wanted him, the big get here, and they've tried to really overhaul their offensive line. They drafted Eichenberg last year in the second round. You've got guys like Greg Little. By the way, here's another former Bengal who's a tight end, Stephen Carter. Former Bengals all over the AFC East, folks. I'm telling you. But they have done a lot of things, John, to try and retool the offensive line. I mentioned Armstead. They had Eichenberg from last year, and then I'm going to go up and pull some of these others here on the guard tackle spectrum. You see Solomon Kinley, a Georgia guy. Robert Jones, Austin Jackson, a former high pick out of SC as a tackle guy. So they're going to have to figure out. I mean, you've got a guard tackle, Austin Jackson. Eichenberg, you thought maybe could be guard tackle. I think they've got him still as a tackle, so you probably kick Jackson inside. You got Armstead, you got Eichenberg, and then some others here to help retool things.
Yeah, man. Like, I know you're an SC guy, but I'll just say it. Austin Jackson, I don't think was ever worth that first round pick that they used on him back in 2020. And he was the left tackle as a rookie, didn't do very well. Then they drafted Eichenberg to be the left tackle. He also didn't do very well. So now they signed one of the best left tackles in the game in Terran Armstead, but they've now moved Eichenberg to left guard. They moved Jackson to right tackle. Who knows if they're going to be better at those new positions? So those are two huge question marks. Robert Hunt, he's a solid guard. He's going to be at right guard. And then they signed Connor Williams too. So I don't really know who's going to be the center. Like maybe Connor Williams is the center, because this is like a lot of names that I expect to start, but I don't know if there's like a true starting quality center on the roster. Ted Karras played, I think, a year for the Dolphins, and he was at center for them, and then he came back to New England. Now he's with the Bengals. But yeah, that seems to be my biggest question mark, because they have a lot of names here who can play guard and tackle, but I don't know if there's like Trey Hopkins could maybe sign and like start at center for the Dolphins, if we're being honest.
Yep. Well, their head coach is a former 49ers assistant. And when you look at the running back group, you see that stamp from the Shanahan offense that comes over here. It's athletes, it's versatility, it's able to stretch outside and catch the football. And that's especially what you get with guys like Myles Gaskin, Raheem Mostert. Ahmed can do a bunch of different things. Edmonds can do a bunch of different things. And then Michelle's kind of a little bit more your traditional running back, but athletes and versatility out of the running back spot.
This is so fascinating to me. Ted Nguyen of The Athletic wrote a phenomenal article about just trying to figure out what this offense is, because like you said, McDaniel comes from the 49ers system where it's a lot of wide zone, and Tua at quarterback has normally ran like a read option type of read based system. So how are those two going to mesh with the running game? Because McDaniel's he's very analytical, and he knows that the game is built around the passing game, but he loves to run the ball, and he's built a system and a scheme that's designed to get creative in that sense. So how he marries what he knows and what the Dolphins and Tua knows are going to be interesting with this collection of running backs.
So no more Devontae Parker in the Miami wide receiver core, but they bring in Tyreek Hill. Big acquisition there. They drafted Jalen Waddle last year. Speed between those two guys. Cedric Wilson's a capable guy as well. Good player. So, I mean, by the way, former Bengal, Cody Core on the roster.
Good for him.
Yeah, and Lynn Bowden, a former high pick of the Raiders who's bounced around a little bit. So, I mean, they've got speed in this group here. Preston Williams, that he's kind of their size guy. So, I mean, I think the talent is there. You look at the other pass catchers too, Gesicki, who's on the franchise tag, I believe. You got Shaheen at tight end, and they've got pass catchers here. A lot of talent. Like the Jets, it comes down to Tua.
Pretty much. And I know the talking point is, how is Tua going to get the ball to two of the fastest receivers, or three of the fastest receivers in the game, if he can't throw accurately deep? But I still remember like he wasn't playing with slow guys at Alabama. Like they were stretching the field when he was himself in 2018 and in 2019 for the Crimson Tide. So he was slinging it back then, and of course he got injured, and he's never quite looked like that version of himself ever since he got to the NFL. So that's a huge question mark. But we've at least seen him do it before, and I think the Dolphins are kind of banking on that happening again. But it really does seem like, hey, we got you a left tackle. We got you one of the best, most electrifying receivers in the game. If you can't do it this year, like it might be now or never for Tua. But we've seen him do it before. We just haven't seen him do it at this level.
Yeah, it's they've kind of it feels like they've given him all the tools to potentially succeed, and we'll see what happens. We're going a little long here, so we're going to kind of try and abbreviate the next two and get out of here. New England Patriots, really, to me, this team was a surprise last year. I did not think they would be very good, and they kind of surprised me a little bit with some things. And I still am not a big believer in Mac Jones. And again, this team's probably going to go a little bit with where he goes, but because of who their coach is and stuff, that's a little bit more debatable. But you've got Malcolm Butler here in the defensive backfield. Kyle Duggar, interesting player as well. You've got one of the other McCourty who did not retire, Devin McCourty. Jabril Peppers now on the team. So, I mean, some big names, but a lot of guys that they try and move around and do different things in that secondary group.
Yeah, like at corner, Jalen Mills. You got Terrence Mitchell, who played with the Browns for a little bit in the past couple of years. They lost J.C. Jackson to the Chargers. I mean, the Patriots don't normally pay those guys big contracts, but they never get any flack for it. But that's a whole nother story. But the defense is mostly comprised of guys that fit the system because Belichick is so good at creating and curating the system and getting players to fit. But there's not a ton of star power here. So you kind of feel like a well-oiled machine on offense can take advantage of maybe the lack of opportune matchups from the Patriots side of things, because there's just not a lot of star power here. And there's not a ton of playmakers. There's guys that can definitely develop into being better players, but I just look at this cornerback group, and I mean, even McCourty's on the wrong side of 30. There's not a ton here.
Yeah, and when you look at the defensive line, it's kind of the same, right? I mean, it's you've got Lawrence Guy, who's been in the league for a long time. You've got just a kind of a lot of guys that they're system guys, right? I mean, it's just guys that do what are. I mean, Barmore is a pretty good player, but I mean, it's just kind of a lot of Yasir Durant. I mean, there's some names in there, but it's really just kind of fit the system, rotate, mix the looks up, Belichick system.
Pretty much. Like Josh Uche, like he was a fascinating prospect out of Michigan, but he's never quite developed into like an above average pass rusher. Barmore, like you said, he's really good at the point of attack, but he's not Aaron Donald out there. Matt Judon, like he signed like a huge deal with the Patriots, and I think he missed some time with them, but I think he's still a good player. He is. I think he's the guy that Joe Burrow said was like the best trash talker that he faced as a rookie when he was still with the Ravens. So it'll be interesting to see that reunion there. But Dietrich Wise, Henry Anderson, Lawrence Guy, Devon Gottschall, all competent players that will just fill their gaps and do their job. But again, if you have a special offense facing this kind of defense, like it's going to take a masterclass performance from the defense to kind of limit them, I would say.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Judon, who's listed as a linebacker. You got Raekwon McMillan. There's Uche as well at the linebacker. I mean, obviously outside linebacker, edge type of player. So I mean, yeah, you've got just some different stuff going on at the linebacker spot. Let's see here. I think we went through all the defense there. Offensive line, you've got Trent Brown. This is a team that has traditionally also bred guys on their homegrown guys on their offensive line, and then they go bolt elsewhere for big deals and just aren't the same after being with the Patriots, So your take on the offensive line here, you got Isaiah Wynn. Some Bengals fans wanted him a while ago. Cole Strange, some names on there where you go, there's some names you recognize.
Yeah, Strange. That was 2 picks before the Bengals picked in the first round, and it took everybody by surprise because I think was like Sean McVay who said, yeah, we were scouting him in like the 3rd round, but now
Right.
it was a waste of time to watch him, I guess. So Patriots are the Patriots. They kind of go their own way and typically works out for them, but they drafted him because they traded Shaq Mason to the Patriots, and they traded Shaq Mason to the Buccaneers, and the only reason why the Buccaneers traded for Shaq Mason is because Alex Kappa signed with the Bengals. So that is why Cole Strange, in essence, is a New England Patriot 1st-round pick. He's playing in between Isaiah Wynn, who's one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's like 6'3", 300, but he's a dominant left tackle, which is awesome. David Andrews is the center there. So I think he has been, but Ted Harris has played some center for them in the past. Michael Onwenu, I believe, out of I'm dropping the college name, but he's really good at right guard. And then Trent Brown is only good in New England. So like, I guess he found a home there.
Right. Yeah. Mike he went to Michigan a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some good players on that offensive line for sure. And then when you look, you mentioned, they draft pretty well in the offensive line. Well, where do they not draft well? In the wide receiver department.
Yeah.
They are not good at drafting wide receivers. They brought in Nelson Aguilar. I think he was on their team last year, if I remember correctly. Kendrick Bourne, who was on San Francisco for a little while. They got Jacoby Myers, who was one of their leading guys, but they got Parker as well. So he had a couple of productive years in Miami, but we'll see what happens there. Of course, they've got Matthew Slater, who has played 15 years in the league. Good Lord. Special team staple, though. Ty Montgomery, a guy who's been around for a long time. So really, again, not a lot that's super scary at the wide receiver position. You've got a couple of decent athletes in Bourne and Aguilar. Aguilar's been up and down throughout his career with drops, but also has had a couple of productive years. And then, what are you getting out of Devontae Parker?
Pretty much. Like it's a collection of solid receivers, but there's just not that guy like commands attention, I guess. And like Bourne, like he stretches the field, or I'm sorry, not Bourne. You're talking about Nelson Aguilar would be the guy who stretches the field for them. And I feel like he like his contract was like a miniature version of like the Christian Kirk contract, because when the Patriots signed him the beginning of like last free agency, like, why are they giving all this money to Nelson Aguilar? But you're right, like they don't have any like receivers of their own that they've developed, so they've had to kind of outsource at that position group, and they did it with Devontae Parker, they did it with Jacoby Myers, they did it with Kendrick Bourne. Matthew Slater was a rookie the year that Tom Brady tore his ACL and Matt Castle played for them. That's how long he's been in the NFL.
Yeah. But kudos to him. He's been just kind of this unheralded, very good player. Tight end group, Hunter Henry, obviously a pretty good player there. Dalton Keene can do some things. Jonnu Smith. And then they drafted a few years ago Devin Asiasi. So some decent talent in that group. That may be a little bit of a matchup problem for the Bengals. But, again, the Bengals drafted in their secondary a lot of athletes with speed, athleticism, and size.
Yeah. Like Henry and Smith, they're going to continue to be counted on as like the guys that are, I would assume, have a big chunk of responsibility in this offense. And, obviously Mac Jones has continued to progress. I think he himself played a lot better than what I expected. For some reason, I just wasn't as high on him coming out of college, but he adapted really well in his first year. And that's the thing too. Like he's now got a new offensive coordinator. I think that's something that not a lot of people were talking about. This is the first time in a long time that the Patriots are going to be without Josh McDaniels and without Tom Brady. So it's a completely new type of system, I would assume, but I would imagine they would keep some things the same for Mac because they don't want to completely change it up just in the second year. But yeah, Henry and Smith are definitely going to be looked upon when Jones drops back.
Then you look at running back. I mean, you've got the Swiss Army knife, James White. You've got Ramondre Stevenson, who came on a bit last year. You've got Damian Harris as well. So some talent there, but definitely guys that have to be able to do different things as Belichick likes.
Yeah, Damian Harris is really good. He was like the whole reason why they beat the Bills when they didn't. I think Mac Jones threw the ball like 3 times when it was 50-mile-an-hour winds.
That's right.
Harris just ran all over the Bills' defense. So we'll see if that happens again.
And then, of course, I don't know how you feel about Mac. I mean, I think he pleasantly surprised some last year, but like you said, there were times where you don't trust him to throw in a windstorm. So I again, one of these teams also a little bit because they're a little bit more of a stable franchise, but as you don't feel anywhere close to as confident in this team and the sustained success as you did with someone else under center that was his predecessor.
Of course. And I think they should be foolish that if they believe that they can develop any quarterback to that level, even if he's not already coming into the league like physically and mentally gifted, because Tom Brady, everyone renounce him for his leadership abilities or just his intangibles, but he didn't start that way. He had to develop to a certain extent. And the same will have to be the case for Mac Jones, who I think is underrated in terms of his arm talent. But like you said, there are some limitations to his game, and he's got to grow into the role, I guess. And he's 24, so he's got time. But yeah, I think he came into a decent situation in terms of the stability around him. But they're going to need to continue adding weapons around him if they want to get the most out of him.
All right, and let's find. I knew this was going to take longer than I had hoped, but we're gonna start closing up here. We're going to talk about the Bills and then start to get on out of here. This is the Buffalo Bills and their roster. Obviously, the biggest hurdle and one of the darlings of the AFC. In terms of a lot of prognostications of them going to the Super Bowl this year. They almost did it last year, but they've got a lot of talent everywhere on this roster, John.
Exactly. And I feel like Bengals fans aren't giving the Bills enough credit, because the Bills are looked at as maybe the best team in the NFL because they won 12 games last year, and they were not so good in close games. Like, they ran into, unfortunately, a lot of bad luck for some of those games. And you could say maybe they just didn't close well, but as we've seen in the past, some of those things that happen one year, they don't translate into the next year. And they didn't get worse. Like, this team is still really good, and they ran into bad luck last year, and they easily could have beaten the Chiefs in that one of the greatest playoff games that we've ever seen. So this team deserves all of the credit that they're receiving. I have no issues saying that the Bills are better than the Bengals, because look at the team. They're not bad at literally anything. Like, their whole defense is phenomenal. Their linebackers, their cornerbacks, their safeties, there's no weaknesses on that defense. And I think that should have scared Bengals fans if they would have had to go into Buffalo and try to put up 20 or 30 against Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau. And now they have Kyer Elam and Von Miller on that defense to go with Matt Milano, Trey Edmonds, like Jordan Poyer. It's a solid 11.
Yeah, and you look at, they just added Kyer Elam to go with Trey White in that cornerback group, so that's going to be a problem. AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, a lot of guys. You got Rousseau in there, a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback and get problems, give you problems. Of course, Ed Oliver in there as well. So just a lot of good players. Tim Settle, I remember liking him a few years back when the Bengals were potentially going to draft him. So that's a lot of guys in here that just can get to you on defense and do provide a lot of different matchup problems. And they are very strong in the secondary, very strong up front. Just to kind of abbreviate and go a little quickly here. I mean, you look at their offensive line, Cody Ford, a name that a lot of Bengals fans recognize that he was maybe a target for them. You've got Roger Saffold in there. What's your take on their offensive line?
It's definitely their biggest question mark, just because to the right of Deion Dawkins and Roger Saffold and Mitchell Morris, you have, I think, Ryan Bates is the right guard. He played a little bit towards the end of last season. Like, he's okay. And then Spencer Brown, who I think he was drafted as a right tackle. And he came out of Northern Iowa last year. And I think he was one of the reasons why they eventually let go of Darrell Williams, who was the right tackle entering the beginning of last season. Then Darrell Williams kind of got phased out of the lineup. He was playing right guard a little bit. Now he's still, I think, a free agent. So Spencer Brown is going to be counted on to basically take command of that spot. And if you want to point out a weak point entering week one, it's definitely going to be the right side of the offensive line.
Yep, and look who it is, Mr. Bobby Hart on this team at
Speaking of right tackles.
Yeah, speaking of right tackles and all kinds of different things. And then you look at tight end, they've got OJ Howard, Dawson Knox, a lot of talent on that in the pass catching group. Tavon Austin on that in that group. Jamison Crowder,
he's still kicking it. Wow.
Yeah, Jamison Crowder, Gabriel Davis, who is a very good player. Stephon Diggs, also a very good player. You've got Touchdown Jesus, Jay Kumaro on the roster here. Isaiah McKenzie, So I mean, they've got players here. Again, it's just solid, and what to me, I think for the Bengals perspective, I think you can look at this and, like you said, I think you look at it and you go, man, there's just a little bit of a roster despair, not a big gap between the Bengals and this team, but they're just solid across the board, and it's really going to be kind of a coaching thing, right? I mean, it's going to be where do you exploit the matchups? What do you do? And obviously, who's going to make the cliched less mistakes on the day. So this one is in Cincinnati, I believe.
It's Monday night.
Monday night towards the very end of the year. So I think it's the day after New Year's Day on the 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. So a very interesting game, probably a high stakes game to some degree for these two teams. But I mean, would you agree with that assessment that it's mostly kind of going to be a coaching / matchup thing?
Sure. And I think the Bengals are going to try to make Josh Allen or put him into some precarious situations, because that seems to be the only way to stop him. Because, I mean, he's developed as good as you could even possibly expect coming out of Wyoming. Like, I didn't necessarily have high expectations for him. And then he got Stephon Diggs, who I think is criminally underrated when you look at the best receivers in the NFL. He's been phenomenal every single year he's been out there with the Vikings and now the Bills. Gabriel Davis is maybe the best pure number 2 receiver in the NFL. Like, just talking about not being a number 1, but just being like the best complement to a number 1. Allen's got both of those guys running down the sidelines, and he's making plays, avoiding pass rushers, and just has maybe the best pure arm in the NFL. And that will always keep the Bills in a game. And that's why it's imperative for the Bengals. Whenever there is a mistake, there is a weakness to exploit from a coaching perspective, or Allen makes a precarious throw, the Bengals have to pounce, because they are never, ever out of the game when Diggs and Allen are hitting on all cylinders.
That is correct. And the Bengals aren't out of many games either with their quarterback and multitude of receiving options and other players on their team. So as iconic of a game as the AFC Championship was last year, I am curious, or the what if of how would that game have gone with the Bills and the Bengals last year as well. So that is the AFC East. We've gone long there, but we've previewed them. We've talked about a ton here. We're going to do a quick remember when, drop the mic, and get out of here. And the remember when actually ties into a bit of an announcement that we'll make in just a little bit. But as I've said, it's kind of been an exciting past few weeks for the podcast channel and all kinds of different things. We've had special guests, and we talked about how going back to Willie Anderson's days and whatnot. Bengal Jim on our channel is going to be having kind of a 2005 reunion show. So he's going to have a lot of special guests from that 2005 playoff team. I think Shane Graham, Justin Smith, many others are going to be on there. And John, kind of in that vein, I thought about the 2005 draft class recently, and that has to be the ultimate what if class, especially when you look at those first 3 picks: David Pollock, Odell Thurman, Chris Henry. The latter two had quite a bit of production. Pollock had an unfortunate situation. There was a lot of unfortunate situations with Pollock being the guy that, got, first of all, David Pollock, first round pick. I felt like Marvin Lewis was a guy, and this is the remember when, talking about David Pollock and kind of the 2005 draft class a little bit. I remember being psyched about this because I kind of finally felt that even though he's running a more traditional 4-3 with the Bengals as opposed to what he ran with the Ravens, I felt like Marvin Lewis had a guy that he was going to be like his Peter Boulware for the Bengals defense, just a guy that you can move around and get him off the edge. They were going to try and make him do some traditional linebacker things as well, but they were going to get him to get after the quarterback. Well, unfortunately, they drafted him. He had a contract dispute, as was part and parcel of a lot of first-round picks with the Bengals. So he held out, came late to camp. In his first season with the Bengals, he played, I think, in 14 games, got 4.5 sacks as a rookie, as a rotational guy. Obviously was getting up to speed on a lot of different things with the Bengals. So you felt like in his second season, this was going to be the breakout year. Well, early in the season, unfortunately, he suffered a neck injury, that caused him to retire. And when you look at the talent and you look at the what could have beens of those first 3 picks, David Pollock, Odell Thurman, by the way, college teammates as well on that Georgia defense, and then of course the late Chris Henry, it's I don't want to say untapped potential because there was unfortunate circumstances following at least a couple of these guys. And then, some other things going on with a guy like Thurman, I guess. But you just look at it and you go, man, remember when the Bengals seemed to have this thing figured out with the 2005 draft class, spearheaded by this guy. And yeah, even with the holdout and all of that, he still showed that talent and that explosiveness that he had at Georgia.
It's totally fair to claim it as like one of the biggest what ifs in at least recent franchise history, because like Pollock was that guy. Like you saw just in his first year, like you said, the production wasn't quite there, but his potential coming out of Georgia as an insanely athletic edge. Like you're talking like 99th percent, like flexibility and agility for a guy who was, again, the size of an edge rusher. And then Thurman, again, another explosive athlete. And then Chris Henry, a 4.3 guy, like someone who I think Chad Johnson compared to Randy Moss. And he was so shocked at how like Carson could barely he thought that Carson was like throwing it too far for him, but Henry was always able to find, the ball and get underneath it. But specifically with Pollock, I kind of forgot that he played that much in his rookie year. I almost remember like that injury happening in his rookie year. And I guess this is a testament to a career that was so lost because, it's been almost 2 decades now. And not a lot of people remember what he did in the NFL. And he's best known as a college football analyst for ESPN. He's on Game Day and he does a great job with that. And he's on Twitter. He has a great personality there. So yeah, with Pollock, it was definitely sad to see, a first round pick, his career end so soon. And then everything with Thurman. Did you know that Odell Thurman's kid is now old enough to commit to Ohio State? I think he's going to be the new Buckeye. Yeah. I think he's a tight end too.
Really?
He's not a linebacker. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, speaking of David Pollock, this gets us into a little bit of an announcement. And as I mentioned, that we have a little bit of a special announcement that he, being David Pollock, will be joining us on the program next week. And we are very excited about that, not only to talk about his time with the Bengals, his transition into TV, and creating a very successful career for himself. We may talk a little college football as well, maybe players to watch. But obviously a great guy, does a lot in the community, a great personality for TV, and, a guy that I think is going to bring a lot of entertainment value and a lot of great perspective on football and a lot of different things next week on the show. So we're excited to have him. And the one thing I want to share, John, I assume you're excited as well.
I am, absolutely.
Yeah. The one thing I want to share here, and this is just quickly, and we're gonna do much like we did last year with the Ring of Honor thing. It's kind of that time of year a little bit. There is a charity we want to support, and it is the Pollock Family Foundation, and you can be found at Pollock Family Foundation. This is a little bit of my drop the mic, by the way. PollockFamilyFoundation.org. And we're going to try and raise. They've got some lofty goals here, and it is run by David Pollock and his family. It is about family health, family wellness, both physically, mentally, all that kind of stuff. They raise a lot of funds. They do a lot of stuff in Georgia and across the nation, and we want to be a supporter of that. They've got a big fundraising goal that we want to try and be a part of, and we want to try and kind of rally the troops. You guys did an awesome job for us last year, raising literally thousands of dollars for the Ken Riley Foundation, the Munoz Foundation, Ken Anderson Alliance. And so we're going to make this kind of a charity we want to spotlight. And we may do that for a while, not just for next week or the next coming weeks or what have you, but we're going to do that. I've already got some prizes and whatnot for some big donors and stuff like that. So we'll do the whole giveaway thing again and all of that. But Pollock Family Foundation, that's the charity. We'll be talking about that next week as well. And we hope we can count on all of you for your support as well.
Absolutely, man. I also want to give a shout out or to try to inspire financial donation, I guess, to another worthy cause. And that is a cause that is Skyline Chili. Because I think most people can agree that Skyline Stadium is probably the best if they're going to come off of Paul Brown Stadium, Skyline Stadium kind of rolls off the tongue the best. It fits perfectly because you have the Cincinnati skyline in the background. Unfortunately, guys, as much as I love Skyline, they don't have it like that. They're not going to be able to drop millions of dollars onto a stadium names rights deal. So I'm urging all of you guys out there, because I don't think Skyline is a public company. We can't GameStop this, to raise their stock value price by shorting them. So we have to do this the old-fashioned way. We got to eat a lot of conies. We got to eat a lot more conies than we've normally done so. So if you eat 1 coney a week, I need you to bump that up to about 3. If you eat 3 conies a week, I need you to bump that up to about, let's go 9 or 10. Whatever it is that you normally eat at Skyline per week, I need you to bump it up a little bit. We got to raise the value of Skyline as a company if we want to get Skyline's name on the stadium. And also, we got to bump Gold Star out of the stadium. Not a lot of people know that Gold Star is the official chili of Cincinnati, which is unacceptable if you ask me. So we're going to have to basically completely skyrocket the value of Skyline if we want Skyline's name to be on Paul Brown Stadium. So that is my message to all of our loyal listeners.
There you have it. That's going to do it for this week. Again, want to remind everybody to go subscribe to the Cincy Jungle podcast channel on your favorite audio streamer. We are on all the major ones. Give a like to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. They're about 82,000 strong there at the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. And then, of course, get to our YouTube channel as well. Subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available. We're putting out new stuff. We put out a Bengal biography on Tyler Boyd. We're going to be doing more of those. We're going to be doing more of these shows. We're going to bring back listener questions. We're going to bring back happening headlines. I promise we're going to do all that kind of stuff. Just taking not a full break, just a little bit of break while there's a little bit of a lull in the schedule. But long show tonight, John. I apologize, but it was a good one, I feel like.
It's good to talk to you again, man. I missed you yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Even one extra day feels like it's like a long time. It's like we're out of the routine. But hey, we've got a lot to get to. We've got a very special episode with David Pollock next week. Excited about that. We hope we can count on you for your support. We'll let you know what we set up and how we set up where you can distribute funds, win some prizes, all that kind of stuff while helping out a great cause in the Pollock Family Foundation. So we're looking forward to that. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, John. We will see you all soon. And take care. Hoo day.